Hi, my name is Evan Sanchez, and I'm the Educator Support Manager here at the Science Penguin. Today, I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks that you can use whenever you're using your test prep task cards with your students. I'm going to give you some strategies that I've used in the past, as well as some ideas of how you can implement it with your students. Stay tuned. So if you already own the test prep task cards, you may be thinking, how did I get them? Did I buy them as an individual set, such as this example here? Maybe you were just like, okay, I'm teaching mixtures. I want to go ahead and get the card set for that to assess my students near the end. Maybe you loved it and you wanted to upgrade. You could have upgraded to the Science Test Prep Task Cards bundle. And with that one, that's where you get all of our test prep task cards for the year. And it encompasses like properties of matter, energy, life science, earth science, even star prep. Or if you already have our bundle, the fifth grade bundle, then you're in luck. It's already going to be in there. So I just wanted to reiterate that for you so that way you have that for reference. Now, what I really love about our task cards are they're not just like your, here we go, glance, answer, move on. These really require a lot more analysis because it's not just getting your students to know the content TEK, it's taking it that step even further by looking at our process TEKs. And as we very well know, when they are looking at a STAR question, a lot of times there's going to be some sort of process TEK along with it, so that way they really know if the students can take it from the basic level and apply it. Our task cards, they do increase in rigor. So for instance, we have 20 of them. The very beginning parts of those first 20 are going to be simpler. Then they gradually get harder, and they get harder after that to the highest rigor. So even though there are 20 cards, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sign every single one. Some teachers may want it to where they pick a few from the beginning, pick a few from the middle, pick a few from the end. So that way you can see the progression of your students on what they have gained in their understanding. So you may be wondering, okay, how can I make sure that test prep task cards are going to be effective in my classroom? Well, the biggest key component that I want to bring up is making sure that you have frequent check-ins with your students. They love that human interaction and hearing right there on the spot if they're doing right. So that way they're not left aside and thinking, am I on the right track or am I not? You know, sometimes we may copy off something such as the task cards and say, here you go, do it, and then turn it in when you finish. But a problem with that for me especially was I may not necessarily have had time to check it in that class period to let them know how they did. A lot of times it may have been during my conference period I'm grading, or maybe even after school I was grading, and then it was until the very next day or another day, depending on, our lives and schedules, to really sit down and talk to my students about like, okay, hey, we really need some work here. What can we do? So to combat that, what I did was, if we were in the classroom and I wanted them to really show some great strategies going on, I would make it like a packet, but they would do several with a partner and then come see me. Sometimes I would say, go do 3 and then come see me. And in this case, I would probably say, go do 4 and then come to me, and that way we can check it. I loved having my students work in pairs because 1, gets those students collaborating. 2, you can hear that wonderful content-rich discussion going on between the two of them to really say, wow, I'm really hearing how they're analyzing and saying, no, that can't be it. That can't be right. I loved just seeing and hearing those moments with my students. So when they would come in and they would check in with me, typically, I have them bring their task cards so I can see if they're showing their strategies to slow them down. And then they would also bring their answer key so I can just quickly glance with my answer key, okay, you got it, or if you didn't get it. If they got it right, I would just put a check. If they got it wrong, I would put a circle around that number, and I would tell the partners to go back and try those again and see if you can find your mistake. I loved letting my students do that first without me giving that answer right away. I wanted them to really process, reread it, see where they may have made that mess up first. And then that way, when they came back to check in with me, they can be like, oh my gosh, I made a simple mistake, or I just still don't get it. So if they came back and they got it right, wonderful. I put a little check inside of that circle and they can move on to what they need to. If they were still missing it, or if they're like, I am lost, that is when I was able to pull them in right there on the spot and give them that one-on-one kind of mini lesson, small group at that time. I loved it because one, I was grading as I was going, and two, they were getting that feedback so they knew if they were on the right path. Now, sometimes I had it to where I wanted them to be kind of outside the classroom, and not every classroom is going to be large. And so sometimes I like to just give them a new environment. So what I would do is I would print off the cards. I'd put them in color, and I usually made like 2 different sets. And the reason why I did 2 different sets was they didn't necessarily have to go in order. We would just take a clipboard, and each student would get their answer sheet that they would have, and they would take their clipboard, they would solve the problem. Sometimes I would even have dry erase markers so they could write on the cards on the hallway and talk about it, and that was fine with me, and then they could just erase it. But they didn't have to. But the reason why I liked having 2 sets was I told my students they can go in whatever order, but I did prep them. I said, just know, like numbers 1, the very beginning ones are going to be easy, and then they get harder as you go along. So that way they were kind of, aware of the task that they were upon. So I liked having 2 sets because if a student was waiting for question number 1, most likely if I had another set, they would be able to go and work on that card without having to be interrupted. So that's why I like 2 sets, but 1 set can work as well depending on how you group them. I liked this option because 1, it got me up and moving more. And so I could go around either the room if I put them around the room or in the hallway, and I could just monitor, constantly give the feedback. Good, we got it. Okay, let's talk about that one right now. And so again, really great discussion. Takes some time to get that management, but if you really go over the steps of how you want your students to perform on them, they will adjust to it, okay? So again, lapping and giving that feedback consistently. So here are some ways that you can make it fun. 1, maybe you could have the students play kind of like a board game, 1 against 1 or 2 against 2. For example, Connect 4 is an easy one that you can use in partners, but other board games can even work too. I've seen Candyland, anything, Chutes and Ladders, fun stuff. So for instance, they would flip that task card over. They would both write down their answers on a whiteboard. If they get it right, they get to place their tokens in the Connect 4 game board. And if they both get it right, well, who gets to do it first? And they can roll a dice. So that would be something that you could provide them even with an answer key, or you could, even go to those students and say, okay, what'd y'all get on your whiteboard? All right, y'all got it right. And that way they're still getting that interaction and feedback along the way. Now, I have some other options that I'm going to show you that you may find very appealing. This website, deck.toys. So with a teacher, you do get a free teacher sign up. I used this in my classroom and the kids had a lot of fun because it really gamified what they did. For instance, I had a Super Mario one that they had on there and it was already pre-made, which is awesome. And so what I would do is I would screenshot it, and I'd put them in for each of the parts. You could add little, fun part components like, all right, write this number down for, a secret code that's going to come up to unlock a key. The nice thing is they already have the templates there. You just plug in the stuff to go, and it just makes it a little bit more interactive. Another option that I've done too is doing quizzes. I do it I like to do the instructor paced one where you can either do it as a classic where they're kind of working at their own pace and then you're seeing live results as you go. Or I've done it where everybody is working on the question together. So I might put them in teams. I might put them just in partners as well. They solve it, they answer it. It takes a little time. So those are ways that you can do it digitally. Again, if you do anything digital, whether it's like deck toys, quizzes, or whatever kind of electronic digital way you want to do it, make sure not to have it where it's set to the public. You want it to be private, just to copyright and you owning those products only. So another fun one that I did with my students was what I called speed meet instead of calling it speed dating. So what I would do was the students would get to sit across from each other in pairs, and they would get their menu, and their menu would be their question that they'd have to answer. They would talk about it. They would go through their choices, A, B, C, or D as their appetizers. Which appetizer were they going to choose? And so they loved it because it kind of made them feel like they were in a restaurant. So I would put some restaurant music in the background and everything. So as they would solve them, they would get it. I would check with them. I would kind of be the waiter, and I'll be like, excellent, that is a great appetizer choice for you, as an example, just to make it a lot of fun. And while we were waiting for the other pairs to finish, then they could just talk with one another about anything that was related to that topic. So it had to be like a little nice conversation saying, oh, I really like mixtures because of X, Y, and Z. Or, ooh, I really love how the earth rotates around the sun. Things of that nature. So it is a lot of fun. And when they finish, so whenever the two pairs would finish, then they would stand up. And then they would kind of go in an opposite direction so they can meet with a new partner, and they would see a new card as well. So they would have that kind of alternate, kind of like a game of Scoot, if you've heard that, but in a fun, interactive, and moving way. So there are many options that you can do. Those are just a few of the fun ones that I did in my classroom. I hope that these little tips and tricks were helpful for you. But as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we will be more than happy to help you out.